All right, well, we'll go ahead and start. Before we left last night, Bilbo the burglar had ran into some trolls who were pretty ready to eat him, but they ended up fighting amongst each other. And so we left off with Bilbo watching them fight amongst each other, and we're wondering, is he going to make it out alive? So, here we go. That would have been the time for Bilbo to have left, but his poor little feet had been very squashed in Bert's big paw, and he had no breath in his body, and his head was going round. So there he lay for a while panting, just outside the circle of firelight. Right in the middle of the fight, up came Balin. The dwarves had heard noises from a distance, and after waiting for some time for Bilbo to come back or to hoot like an owl, they started off one by one to creep towards the light as quietly as they could. No sooner did Tom see Balin come into the light than he gave an awful howl. Trolls simply detest the very sight of dwarfs uncooked. Bert and Bill stopped fighting immediately and, "A sack, Tom, quick!" they said. Before Balin, who was wondering where in all the commotion Bilbo was, knew what was happening, a sack went over his head, and he was down. "There's more to come yet," said Tom, "or I might have mistook lots and none at all it is," he said. "No better hobbits, but lots of these here dwarves, that's about the shape of it." "I reckon you're right," said Bert, "and we'd best get out of the light." And so they did. With sacks in their hands that they used for carrying off mutton and under plunder, they waited in the shadows. As each dwarf came up and looked at the fire and the spilled jugs and the gnawed mutton in surprise, pop went a nasty smelly snack over his head, and he was down. Soon Donlin lay by Balin, and Philly and Killy together, and Dory and Nori and Ori all in a heap, and Oin and Gloin and Bilfer and Bolfer and Bomber piled uncomfortably near the fire. "That'll teach 'em," said Tom, for Bilfer and Bomber had given a lot of trouble and fought like mad, as dwarves will when cornered. Thorin came last, and he was not caught unawares. He came expecting mischief, and didn't need to see his friend's legs sticking out of sacks to tell him that things were not at all well. He stood outside in the shadows some way off and said, "What's all this trouble? Who has been knocking my people about?" "It's the trolls," said Bilbo from behind a tree. They had forgotten all about him. "They're hiding in the bushes with sacks," said he. "Oh, said Thorn, and he jumped forward to the fire before they could leap on him. He caught up a big branch all on fire at one end, and Bert got that end in his eyes before he could step aside. That put him out of the battle for a bit. Bilbo did his best. He caught hold of Tom's leg as well as he could. It was as thick as a young tree trunk. But he was sent spinning up into the top of some bushes when Tom kicked the spark up in Thorin's face. Tom got the branch in his teeth for that and lost one of the front ones. It made him howl, I can tell you. But just at that moment, William came up behind and popped a sack right over Thorin's head and down to his toes. And so the fight ended. A nice pickle they were all in now, all neatly tied up in sacks with 3 angry trolls, and 2 with burns and bashes to remember, sitting by them arguing whether they should roast them slowly or mince them fine and boil them, or just sit on them one by one and squash them into jelly. And Bilbo up in a bush with his clothes and skin torn, not daring to move for fear they should hear him. It was just then that Gandalf came back, but no one saw him. The trolls had just decided to roast the dwarves now and eat them later. That was Bert's idea, and after a lot of argument, they had all agreed to it. "No good roasting 'em now. I'd take all night," said a voice. Bert thought it was William's. "Don't start the argument over again, Bill," he said, "or it will take all night." "Who's arguing?" said William, who thought it was Bert that had spoken. "You are," said Bert. "You're a liar," said William. And so the argument began all over again. In the end, they decided to mince them fine and boil them. So they got a great black pot, and they took out their knives. "No good to boil 'em. We ain't got no water, and it's a long way to the well and all," said a voice. Bert and William thought it was Tom's. Shut up, said they, or we'll never have done. And you can't fetch the water yourself for your say any more. Shut up yourself, said Tom, who thought it was William's voice. Who's arguing by you, I'd like to know. You're a booby, said William. Booby yourself, said Tom. Here is a picture of what I assume is coming. Gandalf with Bilbo in the middle. And so the argument began all over again and went on hotter than ever until at last they decided to sit on the stacks one by one and squash them and boil them next time. Who shall we sit on first? Said the voice. Better sit on the last fellow first, said Bert, whose eye had been damaged by Thorin. He thought Tom was talking. Don't talk to yourself, said Tom, but if you want to sit on the last one, sit on him. Which is he? The one with the yellow stockings, said Bert. Nonsense. The one with the gray stockings, said a voice like William's. I made sure it was yellow, said Bert. Yellow it was, said William. Then what did you say it was gray for, said Bert. I never did. Tom said it. That I never did, said Tom. It was you. 2 to 1, so shut your mouth, said Bert. Who are you a-talking to, said William. Now stop it, said Tom and Bert together. The night's getting on and dawn comes early. Let's get on with it. Dawn take you all and be stoned to you, said a voice that sounded like William's. But it wasn't, for just at that moment the light came over the hill and there was a mighty twitter in the branches. William never spoke, for he stood turned to stone as he stooped, and Bert and Tom were stuck like rocks as they looked at him. And there they stand to this day, all alone unless the bird perched on them, for trolls, as you probably know, must be underground before dawn, or they go back to the stuff of the mountains they are made of, and never move again. That is what happened to Bert and Tom and William. Excellent, said Gandalf as he stepped from behind a tree and helped Bilbo to climb out of a thorn bush. Then Bilbo understood. It was the wizard's voice that had kept the trolls bickering and quarreling until the light came and made an end of them. The next thing was to untie the sacks and let out the dwarfs. They were nearly suffocated and very annoyed. They had not at all enjoyed their listening to the trolls make plans for roasting them and squashing them and mincing them. They had to hear Bilbo's account of what happened to him twice over before they were satisfied. Silly time to go practicing pinching and pocket picking, said Bumber, when what we wanted was fire and food. And that's just what you wouldn't have got if those fellows without a struggle, in any case, said Gandalf. Anyhow, you are wasting time now. Don't you realize that the trolls must have a cave or a hole dug somewhere near to hide from the sun in? We must look into it. They searched about and soon found the marks of trolls' stony boots going away through the trees. They followed the tracks up the hill until, hidden by bushes, they came on a big door of stone leading to a cave. But they could not open it, not though they all pushed while Gandalf tried various incantations. Would this be any good? Asked Bilbo when they were getting tired and angry. I found it on the ground where the trolls had their fight. He held out a largest key, though no doubt William had thought it to be very small in secret. It must have fallen out of his pocket, very lucky, before he was turned to stone. Why on earth didn't you mention it before? They cried. Gandalf grabbed it and fitted it into the keyhole. Then the stone door swung back with one big push, and they all went inside. There were bones on the floor, and a nasty smell was in the air. But there was a good deal of food jumbled carelessly on the shelves and on the ground, among an untidy litter of plunder of all sorts, from brass buttons to pots full of gold coins standing in a corner. There were lots of clothes, too, hanging on the walls, too small for trolls. I'm afraid they belonged to victims, and among them were several swords of various makes, shapes, and sizes. 2 caught their eyes particularly because of their beautiful scabbards and jeweled hilts. Gandalf and Thorin each took one of these, and Bilbo took a knife in a leather sheath. It would have made only a tiny pocket knife for a troll, but it was good as a short sword for the Hobbit. "These look like good blades," said the wizard, half drying them and looking at them curiously. "They were not made by any troll, nor by any smith among men in these parts and days. But when we can read the runes on them, we shall know more about them." "Let's get out of this horrible smell," said Philly. So they carried out the pots and coins and such food as was untouched and looked fit to eat. Also 1 barrel of ale, which was still full. By that time they felt like breakfast, and being very hungry, they did not turn their noses up at what they got from the troll's larder. Their own provisions were very scanty. Now they had bread and cheese and plenty of ale and bacon to toast in the embers of the fire. After that they slept, for their night had been disturbed, and they did nothing more till the afternoon. Then they brought up their ponies, and carried away the pots of gold, and buried them very secretly not far from the track by the river, putting a great many spells over them, just in case they ever had the chance to come back and recover them. When that was done, they all mounted once more, and jogged along again to the path towards the east. "Where did you go to, if I may ask?" said Thorin to Gandalf as they rode along. "To look ahead," said he. "And what brought you back in the nick of time?" "Looking behind," said he. "Exactly," said Thorin. "But could you be more plain?" "I went on to spy about our road. It will soon become dangerous and difficult. Also, I was anxious about replenishing our small stock of provisions. I had not gone very far, however, when I met a couple friends of mine from Rivendell." "Where's that?" asked Bilbo. "Don't interrupt," said Gandalf. "You will get there in a few days now, if we're lucky, and find out all about it. As I was saying, I met 2 of Elrond's people. They were hurrying along for fear of the trolls. It was they who told me that 3 of them had come down from the mountains and settled in the woods not far from the road. They had frightened everyone away from the district, and they waylaid strangers. I immediately had a feeling that I was wanted back. Looking behind, I saw a fire in the distance and made for it. So now, you know. Please be more careful next time, or we shall never get anywhere." "Thank you," said Thorin. Chapter 3: A Short Rest. They did not sing or tell stories that day, even though the weather improved, nor the next day, nor the day after. They began to feel the danger that was not far away on either side. They camped under the stars, and their horses had more to eat than they had, for there was plenty of grass, but there was not much in their bags, even with what they had gotten from the trolls. One morning they forded a river at a wide, shallow place, full of the noise of stones and foam. The far bank was steep and slippery. When they got to the top of it, leading their ponies, they saw that the great mountains had marched down very near to them. Already they seemed only a day's easy journey from the feet of the nearest. Dark and drear it looked, though there were patches of sunlight on its brown sides, and behind its shoulders the tip of snow-peaked gleam. "Is that the mountain?" asked Bilbo in a solemn voice, looking at it with round eyes. He had never seen a thing that looked so big before. "Of course not," said Balin. "That is only the beginning of the Misty Mountains, and we have got to get through or over or under those somehow before we come into Wilderland beyond. And it is a deal of a way even on the other side of them to the Lonely Mountain in the east, where Smog lies on our treasure." "Oh," said Bilbo, and just at that moment he felt more tired than ever remembered feeling before. He was thinking once again of his comfortable chair before the fire in his favorite sitting room in his hobbit hole, and of the kettle singing. Not for the last time. Now Gandalf led the way. "We must not miss the road, or we shall be done for," he said. "We need food, for one thing, and rest and reasonable safety. Also, it is very necessary to tackle the Misty Mountains by the proper path, or else you will get lost in them and have to come back and start at the beginning again, if you ever get back at all." They asked him where he was making for, and he answered, "You are come to the very edge of the wild, as some of you may know. Hidden somewhere ahead of us is the fair valley of Rivendell, where Elrond lives in the last homely house. I sent a message by my friends, and we are expected." That sounds nice and comforting, but they had not gotten there yet, and it was not so easy as it sounds to find the last homely house west of the mountains. There seemed to be no trees and no valleys and no hills to break the ground in front of them, only one vast slope going slowly up and up to meet the feet of the nearest mountain. A wide land, the color of heather and crumbling rock, with patches and slashes of green grass, of grass green and moss green showing where water might be. Morning passed, afternoon came, but in all the silent waste there was no sign of any dwelling. They were growing anxious, for they saw now that the house might be hidden almost anywhere between them and the mountains. They came on unexpected valleys, narrow with steep sides, that opened suddenly at their feet, and they looked down in surprise to see trees below them and running water at the bottom. There were gullies that could almost leap over, but very deep with waterfalls in them. There were dark ravines that one could neither jump over nor climb into. There were bogs, some of them green, pleasant places to look at, with flowers growing bright and tall. But a pony that walked there with a pack on its back would never have come out again. It was indeed a much wider land for the ford of the mountains than you ever would have guessed. Bilbo was astonished. The only path was marked with white stones, some of which were small, and others were half covered with moss and heather. Altogether, it was a very slow business following the track, even guided by Gandalf, who seemed to know his way about pretty well. His head and beard wagged this way and that as he looked for the stones, and they followed his lead. But they seemed no nearer to the end of the search when the day began to fail. Tea time had long gone by, and it seemed supper time would soon do the same. There were moths fluttering about, and the light became very dim, for the moon had not risen. Bilbo's pony began to stumble over roots and stones. They came to the edge of a steep fall in the ground so suddenly that Gandalf's horse nearly slipped down the slope. "Here it is at last!" he called, and the others gathered round him and looked over the edge. They saw a valley far below. They could hear the voice of hurrying water in a rocky bed at the bottom. The scent of trees was in the air, and there was a light on the valley side across the water. Bilbo never forgot the way they slithered and slipped into the dusk down the steep zigzag path into the secret valley of Rivendell. The air grew warmer as they got lower, and the smell of the pine trees made him drowsy, so that every now and again he nodded and nearly fell off, or bumped his nose on the pony's neck. Their spirits rose as they went down and down. The trees changed to beech and oak, and there was a comfortable feeling in the twilight. The last green had almost faded out of the grass, when they came at length to an open glade not far above the banks of the stream. It smells like elves, thought Bilbo, and he looked up at the stars. They were burning bright and blue. Just then there came a burst of song, like laughter in the trees. "Oh, what are you doing? Where are you going? Your ponies need shoeing. The river is flowing. Oh, tra-la-la-la-lee, you're down in the valley. Oh, what are you seeking, and where are you making? The faggots are raking, the bannocks are baking. Oh, trilly-lily-lily-lolly, the valley is jolly, ha-ha-ha-ha. Where are you going, with beards all a-wagging? No knowing, no knowing, what brings Mr. Baggins and ballin' and darlin' down into the valley of June, ha-ha-ha-ha. Oh, will you be staying, or will you be flying? Your ponies are straying, the daylight is dying. To fly would be folly, to stay would be jolly, and listen and hark till the end of talk to our tune. Ha 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 ha. So they laughed and sang in the trees, and pretty fair nonsense, I dare say you think it. Not that they would care, they would only laugh all the more if you told them so. They were elves, of course. Soon Bilbo caught glimpses of them as the darkness deepened. He loved elves, though he seldom met them, but he was a little frightened of them too. Dwarves don't get on well with them. Even decent enough dwarves like Thorn and his friends think them foolish, which is a very foolish thing to think, or get annoyed with them. For some elves tease them and laugh at them, and most of all at their beards. Here is a picture of Gandalf leading the way. And I think we'll stop there for the night. We will see tomorrow if Bilbo actually encounters the elves and what does Rivendell actually look like. I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your evening or whenever you watch this, that things are going well for you. And remember, you are loved. Bye, guys. Oh yeah, I also forgot. I figured out how to upload a video here and subscribe here. So check those out. That way you can get updates as we go live all the time. Now I'll say bye.